Hello and welcome everyone to my Java development with Spring Boot tutorial. In this video, I am going to share with you how I handle general and specific exceptions in my Spring Boot project from start to end, step by step. Step 1, create exception classes. Step 2, create generate exception handler method using controller advice and exception handler annotations. Step 3, using response status exception annotation to handle specific exception. Step 1, create the exception classes. First, I create a package name exception here to the Spring Boot application class. This is my Spring Boot application class. As you can see, it's annotated Spring Boot application. Next, I created two symbol exception classes. Each exception class extends from the runtime exception class. Step 2, create the general exception handler class. Extends response entity exception handler class. And annotated with controller advice. Next, I am going to implement the handler method. This method will be annotated with exception handler. The parameters I am going to use in this method are web request and exception, runtime exception. How can I use those parameters? Because in the exception handler documentation, it says that flexible signatures and parameters can be of the following types in any order. As we can see, exception, servlet request, HTTP servlet request, web request, and so on. Also, it's important that we specify the value for the exception handler. We tell it that if the exception class drawn is product not found exception and customer not found exception, then this method will handle those exceptions. Next, we implement the body of the method. We call the handle exception internal method from the response entity exception handler. This method takes the exception object, response body, and other parameter. The response body can be any object, but for now we are using a string to be symbol, and that string contains the context path, the request path, and also the exception message that we throw from the product not found exception or customer not found exception. We need to fix the import. And that is it for the controller advice implementation. Let us now test it for fun. So we go to the controller and we add a new endpoint here. Let's say the endpoint is test exception. And that exception, that endpoint, all we do is throw product not found exception And notice this message, product not found. Now we use Postman to test it. Let us create a new request. Exception. Before we send the request, let us set a breakpoint right here. And we start up the server. It is successfully started up. So we send now. So it hit the breakpoint right here. Do filter, okay, so we let it go. Okay, so it hit the breakpoint right here. Watch out, this product not found. Go. So in the Postman, we see that now exception is caught and handled. It's write out the message, just exception encounter context particle this path. And also it logged the product not found right here, exception not message equal product not found. It's recorded inside the general response entity exception handler right here. If we set the breakpoint here, and we can see it, we hit here. Try again. Now we send again. Let it go. Now it hit the method. Handle nicely. I got the message again. Finally, we are going to use response status exception to rethrow exception. Let us go to the symbol controller and add a new endpoint, test response status exception. In here, suppose that we throw some exception and do handle exception. Then we rethrow the response status exception. Let's say we just throw not found and some message from the exception we throw here. Now we can restart the service and test it out in Postman. Start it up. Now we go to the Postman, copy this, create a new endpoint, create a new request. Test. Okay, so now we send. And we see that the exception sent back, but we don't see the message. So that is because we didn't configure it right. To show this message, we need a little bit configuration. So we go to the application property. We add a new property. Server error dot include back trace equal always. Now we reboot the application. Okay, we are going to send the request again. Now, we see that we throw the response started exception, and the message that we throw before is here. End of the tutorial. I hope that you found it helpful and come back for other tutorials. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.